There are two main causes of rising sea levels. The first is called thermal expansion. As the temperature of the oceans rise, the water molecules expand slightly. This expansion could cause an estimated 0.4 meter rise in global sea levels. The second cause is the melting of the sea ice and glaciers. In the Arctic, the area of ice has already decreased by 15% since 1960, and the thickness of the ice has fallen by 40%, all due to an estimated temperature rise of just 3 degrees Celsius. In Antarctica, the rate of ice loss has increased by 75% between 1996 and 2006, leading to the collapse of several sections of the ice shelves. Between 2000 and 2005, they lost an average of 50 meters per year. On the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau, 80% of the 46,000 glaciers have been affected by rising temperatures. If the ice in these areas melts, the sea levels are expected to rise by up to 70 meters. The sheer amount of money that needs to be spent on adaptation is staggering. The U.S. has roughly 20,000 kilometers of coastline and more than 32,000 kilometers of coastal wetlands. The estimated cost of adapting to a mere 1 meter sea level rise would amount to $156 billion. The impact of a 66 centimeter sea level rise by 2100 suggests costs could be around $236 billion, with almost 9,000 square kilometers of land having to be abandoned and 13,000 kilometers of coastal defenses needing to be constructed. These goals are possible for wealthy coastal countries, but many poorer countries do not have these resources. If current trends continue, cities such as London, Bangkok, New York, Shanghai, and Mumbai will only be some of the cities which end up below sea level. An estimated 23% of the world's population lives in or near coastal zones, and submerged cities will displace millions of people and obviously cause huge economic damages. There comes a point where building higher and higher sea defenses becomes impractical, and even the wealthiest nations will see cities flood. Finally, rural populations will be displaced, and coastal farmlands on some coasts will be flooded. A 1 meter sea level rise would flood 17% of Bangladesh, displacing tens of millions of people and reducing its rice farming land by 50%. That same 1 meter would displace 10.8% of the Vietnamese population and 10.5% of the Egyptian population, as well as flooding 25% of Egypt's delta. There are some island nations which would be submerged. 2 of the islands that make up Kiribati, a Pacific island nation, have already been submerged. In early 2005, others were flooded by a high tide that washed away farmland, contaminated wells, and flooded homes and a hospital. Climate change could also threaten the existence of the Maldives, an archipelago of 1,200 islands. The highest point is a mere 2.5 meters above sea level. The average global sea level is expected to rise 0.37 meters in the coming decades, with other threats including beach erosion, more powerful storms, higher storm surges, and more threats to the country's biodiversity. Rising oceans will contaminate both surface and underground freshwater supplies with saltwater, silt, sewage, and whatever else floodwaters pick up. This will only worsen the world's existing freshwater shortage. Also, many different ecosystems will be destroyed, including, but not limited to, subtidal habitats like oyster reefs, coral reefs, and coastal wetlands, resulting in the extinction of countless species of fish, shellfish, aquatic vegetation, and aquatic microorganisms. Even if increasing salinity in these areas does not kill all of the inhabitants, it only takes the extinction of the more delicate microorganisms or aquatic vegetation to collapse entire food chains. Unfortunately, rising sea levels may not stop for several hundred years, even if global average temperatures drop. This is because even if the surface layer of the ocean cools, heat would still be mixed down in the deeper layers, which will continue to contribute to thermal expansion and sea ice melting. Scientists say even with aggressive measures that limit global warming to less than 2 degrees above pre-industrial values by 2100, sea levels will continue to rise. More than 180 countries are negotiating a new global climate pact which will come into force by 2020 and force all nations to cut emissions to limit warming to below 2 degrees Celsius this century. A level, scientists say, is the minimum required to avert catastrophic effects. Though sea level rise cannot be stopped for at least the next several hundred years, with aggressive mitigation it can be slowed down, and this will buy time for adaptation measures to be adopted.